Hi all and welcome to another week of the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams and tonight is November the 16th. Hi all and welcome to another week of the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams and it's been an interesting week in many ways, and this show is going to be packed again. The usual head twisters and things to ponder over, things to think about, and things to step away from, and all the usual really. Right, let's get rid of the emails and all that stuff before we head right into the show. And the email for the show is truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com, and the link for the show is www.spreaker.com/user/89558881. Excuse me. We also have a link to this site as well. If you want to listen live, it's called thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. All the archives of the biggest shows, they're all documented, they're all in there. The Faction Show, the what's known as the Levershoff Show, the Illuminati shows, and Future of Humanity, and a few other things in there. So they're all in there, and that's thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. We have the Facebook page, Truth, Honour and Integrity, and the Facebook social media alternative page, which is on MeWe.com. It's kind of difficult finding it from what I gather, but just send your an email to the Truth, Honour and Integrity@gmail.com, and then we can add you to that group. We have the People's Club donations website link, which is thepeoplesclub.org, telling you all about what's eventually going to come up when we get the foundation up and running, and some ideas on there. Right, what have we got for this week? Well, a few things first. In the second hour, I will be introducing you all to the very people who have done so much to drive this movement forward, and the ones who have pushed us to the brink of the possibility of changes. So look forward to that in the second hour. This coming Saturday, not Sunday this time, Saturday, we have the next episode of An Evening with Thomas, and we head over to Europe this time, and in particular Holland. Yes, it's called Holland, not the Netherlands. Well, the THI has a fairly large following from over there. In fact, Holland is the 5th on the list of countries in figures who listen to this show. Kind of bizarre is Cyprus is in the top 10. No idea why, but there you go. Anyway, that's at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday, when we will have Ella Stair, who does so much for the Dutch contingent of freedom and truth-seeking warriors from Holland. So I spoke to Ella last week, and I said we will celebrate that fact and have 2 hours of clog dancing music for you all. Live from Holland, only joking. It'll be an interesting show. Ella does a lot of work trying to educate and translate from English into Dutch for all the Dutch listeners, not only to this show but to other shows as well. So look forward to that. Right. What I will say now, before we go into the news, is you must bear this in mind going forward. It's important to grasp this piece to then understand what's playing out currently. Yes, it's difficult trying to make out where it's all coming from, where it all fits in, does it fit in? Are they bullshitters, or are they telling the truth, or are they telling portions of the truth? And that's just the way it is at the moment. There's that much information going round. And basically this is part of the war for the minds. And I will say now we're in an upward curve again, where it's heating up rapidly. And it's all designed to tip you over the edge. And it's important, once again, to stay calm and stay balanced. What I will say is, don't put all your eggs or info in one happy basket. There'll be lots of info on other shows and other forums and other blogs which will be mixed. Some info has hooks in it. Some is a blatant misdirect. Now, the reality of what's going on now is there's two wars ongoing currently. One between the people who have seen through the illusion and want to make a change, and those who wish to continue the illusionary world of constructs, slavery, poverty, control and violence. The awake and the sleepers. That's war one. The other war is within the control system, which in effect is a war within a war in itself. I'll repeat that again. The other war is within the control system, which is a war within a war in itself. And the reason for that is the factions are all infighting. Basically, they're trying to take over control from the departed Draco. And whilst all that's going on, the remaining elements of the covens, who are still playing the games heavily, the two psychotic parents, and other rogue entities who have decided that the people known as the Illuminati haven't fulfilled their contract. Now, that contract runs along the lines of Agenda 21, so you're all familiar with it, wiping out 90% of humanity, etc., etc., with zombie viruses and all kinds of plagues and wars and rock thrown from space and all that nonsense. But the Illuminati have become a liability in terms of cost. The cabal can't afford them all anymore. And so they're also a liability to the fact that some of them no longer want to play their game and have stepped down off their platform. And many of them have stepped onto our platform. So that's, in a nutshell, what's playing out around the world at the moment. I've said repeatedly that some of the events going on are really not our events, but their events. Will we get benefits out of it? Yes, we will. We've had lots of benefits out of the faction infighting. We've had lots of disclosure where they're throwing each other under the bus. We've also had lots of arrests. A lot of firings. Now, the firings that was mentioned, was it 3 or 4 weeks ago? 5,000 fired in one day and 600 arrested and or removed from society, either jail or permanently removed. That's still ongoing. I don't have updated figures. There's a lot of the intel now has gone very underground, and that's partially because there's so much going on, and partially because there's a trust issue. not only between the good guys, but a massive trust issue amongst the bad guys. They don't know now who's working for who. No more than we who want the freedom and want the change can fully trust anybody. And so there's a massive mistrust across both sides at the moment, where nobody really knows who's working for who. We have the benefit because certain groups connected have the filed evidence, the fulcrum. Oops. We've worked hard, or the group connected to this show has worked very hard in every single country to get the truth out. Some of the intel will be evidence of that truth, which will come up in the second hour. So I needed to get that out because there's a lot of stuff on the internet that looks highly promising, but what I would state at this point is to exercise caution. That's why I said don't put all eggs or info into one happy basket. I'm not trying to put you on a downer. I'm just trying to warn you, we have to wait to see what unfolds. It could be something really exciting. It could be something of a downer, or it could be something in the middle. The evidence of which I don't think we have too long to wait for. I think within the next 2 to 3 months, the war will be in full. The war will be in full scope. I don't think anyone will be left under any illusion of what's going on. The behind the scenes stuff, which I know disappoints some. But then, if you were one who operated behind the scenes, would you want it displayed out on a radio show? That puts you and your family and the movement at risk. No. So there's lots of things that have been going on behind the scenes. Some of it very, very beneficial. Some of it not so. And we just have to, we will continue to push forward with what we're doing, but we have to exercise caution as to what may or may not take place. That's all I have to say on that. And on that note, we're going to go into some news. We do have some intel this week, some of it rather interesting, some of it amusing, and some of it, as per usual, it's a case of smacks my head. Right, where's the first news item that we're going to go into? A former White House aide was reportedly offered this week $15 million to help forcibly remove a Muslim cleric from the United States and deliver him to Turkey, of all places. And the ex-National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and his son discussed the alleged plot with Turkish representatives. This was said this week. The matter is said to be under scrutiny in the wider Justice Department probe into alleged Russian election meddling, which is BS. And Mr. Flynn, who we all know by now, quit after misleading the White House about meeting an envoy. And the alleged plot to remove the cleric, Mr. Gulen, was first revealed in March 2017 by former CIA Director James Woolsey, and the Turkish government has accused Mr. Gulen, who lives in the state of Pennsylvania, of being behind last year's failed coup. We all remember all the fun and games in Turkey this time last year. And he is viewed as a chief political rival to the Turkish president, Mr. Erdogan, who has repeatedly called for Mr. Gulen's extradition from the United States. I expect that to run a bit more. We're going to find out more and more about these meetings between different ones and plots and certain ones under contract. A lot more. CIA, elephant in the room, on Saturday said its director, Michael Pompeo, stands by the intelligence community's declassified report that concluded Russia ran an influence campaign aimed at helping President Trump win the White House in 2016. It's no surprise that Langley's come out with that particular stance. You know, the masters of interfering in elections. 61 different elections they've interfered with over time in different countries, and then allegedly someone interferes with our election and they cry foul. It's not correct either way, but it's kind of ironic that they have that stance, but then not surprising. And the director of the CIA said he stands by and had always stood by the January 2017 intelligence community assessment entitled Assessing Russian Activities and Intentions in Recent US Elections. And he went on to say that the assessment with regard to Russian election meddling has not changed from their perspective. The statement follows President Trump's comment about Russian President Vladimir Putin's repeated denials that Moscow was involved in election interference, as well as the discussion between the two world leaders. And the CIA refused to comment on Trump's meeting in Vietnam with Mr. Putin. No, they wouldn't. Does anyone not find it rather odd that a so-called organisation that's supposed to be operated on behalf of the government in this country is in direct conflict? How and why is that allowed? The reality is they are a separate entity altogether. They're self-funding through various rogue means, as we all know by now. And so they think they have the right to say and do what they like. If we're going to move forward in this country, the good people in that building needs to rout out the filth. For not only the benefit of that particular community, but for the benefit of Americans and the people worldwide. Here's an improved report from the HUD people, Housing Urban Development Unit. Efforts to fight homelessness amongst the veteran community appear to be paying off at this time, which is good. The number of homeless veterans was down 40% in 2016 from 5 years ago. And this is according to most recent data from the Housing and Urban Development Group. As of January, 39,500 veterans are still homeless. This was January 2016. The updated ones are not in yet. Of these, 13,067 homeless veterans are also unsheltered. 13,000 living out on the streets after allegedly fighting for your country and for freedoms. Says a lot, doesn't it? So they're living on the streets, in abandoned buildings, and also in cars. While the latest data from HUD won't be available till the end of this year, the preliminary analysis from the Department of Veteran Affairs indicates that 53 communities, including 3 states, Virginia, Connecticut and Delaware, have effectively ended homelessness among the veteran population. I'd be rather concerned of where those homelessness have gone, given what goes on in those 3 particular states. But according to the figures, it's eliminated homelessness in those 3 communities. And the overall homelessness in the United States as of January 2016 is that there's more than 500,000 homeless people in the United States. 500,000. And there's 23 million homes sitting empty. Well, like the African famine, one has to say at this point, it's deliberate. And it's up to us to highlight it and stop it. Now, defence ministers of the US-led NATO alliance this week endorsed proposals to set up 2 new military commands. And it's clear Russia is the target of what are, in effect, war plans. Why are we leading people who are only interested in war? It's time Mr. Trump cut that funding as well. And NATO is planning on setting up of an Atlantic command and logistical hub in Europe to facilitate the transfer of troops and weapons, was openly discussed by NATO officials as being aimed at Russia during their 2-day summit in Brussels this week. The 2 new commands being proposed are the first expansion of NATO's command structure since the end of the Cold War more than 25 years ago. 25 years since the Cold War ended, and we're still talking about Russia, really. It's a retrograde move that's not only unnecessary, but is it not dangerous provocation to Russia? So far, Mr. Putin has not overly reacted. Others wouldn't be as patient, as a reaction would be risking self-fulfilling war threats, would it not? Moreover, NATO's renewed organisational cranking is openly calling for the integration of, wait for it, European societies. Is that a call for the families to join up again? And European societies and economies into its madcap military escalation. We'll find out more on what those integrations are in the intel pieces. So the people in Europe, whether they like it or not, are effectively being dragooned into a state of war with attendant social burdens to pay for that state of war, a bit like Americans, where we've had to pay for everything. And surely they should react to that and not be made to live with the risk of ultimate catastrophe of 2 factions playing games, war games. NATO is Langley 3, is Nazi. It's them that doesn't like the Russians. It's them that's frightened of the Russians. It's them that has less military power than the Russians, whether they like that or tell you that. Different. it's bullshit. The Russians have had more technology for way longer, more advanced. Of course, they strafed that US destroyer last year, didn't they? Just rendered it like a floating bathtub. No weapons fired. Just fancy tech. So, people need to, in Europe and Scandinavia, need to be aware of what's going on with NATO. Those clowns need to be shut down. Including their representative on the internet, Mr. Open Source Man. Here's a story from Syria, which is going to kind of, won't be a surprise, but kind of be annoying. A lorry driver named Abu Farwazi thought it was going to be just another job. Mr. Farwazi drives an 18-wheeler trailer across some of the most dangerous territory in northern Syria, with all the fun and games and the bombings and whatnot is going on. Crossing bombed out bridges, deep desert sand, even government forces and so-called Islamic State fighters. But that doesn't stand in the way of him making his deliveries. But this time, his load was to be a human cargo. The Syrian Democratic Forces, an alliance of Kurdish and Arab fighters opposed to IS or ISIS, wanted him to lead a convoy that would take hundreds of families displaced by fighting from the town in Tabqa on the Euphrates River to a camp further north. So basically get all the displaced families into a safe place away from the war. And the job would take 6 hours maximum, or at least that's what he was told. But when he and his fellow drivers assembled their convoy on October the 12th, they realised they'd been lied to. Instead, it would take 3 days, not 6 hours, of hard driving, carrying a deadly cargo, of which were hundreds of ISIS fighters, their families, and tons of weapons and ammunition. Mr. Fawzi and dozens of other drivers were promised thousands of dollars for the task, but it had to remain secret. And the deal is to let ISIS fighters escape from Raqqa, which is the capital of the self-declared caliphate, funny enough. And it being arranged by local officials, and this came after 4 months of fighting and left the city obliterated and almost devoid of any people. It would spare lives and bring fighting to an end. The lives of Arab, Kurdish and other fighters opposing IS would be spared, but it also enabled many hundreds of ISIS fighters to escape from the city. At the time, neither the US and British-led coalition nor the SDF, which backs it, wanted to admit their part in it. Oops. So this is Raqqa's dirty little secret, unleashed a threat to the outside world by ferrying ISIS out of a region where they've been crushed into other regions to play more games. I wonder who funded that. And this is why it's enabled militants to spread far and wide across Syria and also beyond. Great pains were taken to hide it from the world, the lorry driver stated, but the BBC has spoken to dozens of people who were either on the convoy or observed it, and also to the men who negotiated the deal. Well, it's time for the BBC to out who negotiated that particular deal. Twitter has been in the news this week, providing some value for a change. And men and women are posting pictures of themselves when they were younger to highlight how a 14-year-old child is too young to consent. The social media movement #MeA14 began at the weekend in response to allegations published in the Washington Post against Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore, who has been accused of pursuing a 14-year-old girl when he was 32. So Twitter users have been posting the term #MeA14 alongside pictures of themselves in their early teens and asking rhetorically how a child of 14 can be mature enough to give consent. A fifth woman has since accused Mr. Roy Moore of sexual assault, as Republicans have increased calls for him to step aside. Let's not step aside, let's arrest him and find out whether it's true or not. Anyway, Beverly Nelson said she was 16 years old when Mr. Moore allegedly tried to force himself on her after offering a ride home from her job as a waitress. I tried to fight him off while yelling at him to stop, she said, adding that he locked his car to prevent her from escaping. But Senator Cory Gardner, the National Republican Senatorial Committee chairman, said on Monday he believes Mr. Moore's accusers spoke with courage and truth, and a former Alabama Chief Justice should be expelled if he was elected. If he refuses to withdraw and wins, the Senate should vote to expel him because he does not meet the ethical and or moral requirements of the United States Senate. I have a feeling those houses and Senates and Congress could be rather empty soon. 14 indeed. There's worse than that. I think there's another piece further down. Anyway, the UK Prime Minister, it's funny how we just say that word without splitting it up. Prime Minister. Why would the head of a country be a minister? Maybe it's the head of a church. Theresa May did offer reassurance to everyone in Britain. I have a very simple message for Russia. We know that what you are doing and you will not succeed. May told the audience the absolute definition of establishment is that Russia is seeking to weaponize information, deploying its state-run media organizations to plant fake stories and Photoshop images in an attempt to sow discord in the West and undermine our institutions. Really? Fake stories. And Britain has Sky News, which is Fox. Dear me. Fake stories. See how they tried to twist it? Where everything's fake news now. Basically, they've used a theme from the alternative media and are trying to basically confuse matters. That's fake news, that's fake news. No, everything you've read for the last 20 to 40 years has pretty much been fake news. Unbelievable. Here's A retired military chief in Britain complaining, none other than General Sir Richard Barons, former commander of the Joint Forces Command. He has issued a grim warning. Britain's broken army is 20 years out of date. Ooh. Its military has fallen behind other comparative nations, and the threat of rogue players such as North Korea looms. And all the while the UK government continues to slash the defence budget. We are also locked, he stated, in a daily confrontation with Russia, and we are looking at North Korea, which within, wait for it, within the next 12 to 18 months will make a nuclear missile to an intercontinental range ballistic missile that could reach London, and we can't deal with it. What utter bollocks that is. North Korea is going to have weapons that are going to reach the other side of the world. They can't even reach America. And it's yet again, like the clowns here, ramping up the fear porn. Russia's coming together. Well, they've been doing that for the last 60 years. You would think, after 10, you would think, perhaps they're not coming. But no, let's continue to babble about Russia. And now let's focus on North Korea, North Korea, North Korea, because they haven't got the guts or the kahunas. I know I've said that wrong. Chloe's gonna kick me in the kahunas now for that. I best just say what it is. Bollocks. They haven't got the bollocks to take Iran on, because they'd know both Britain and America would lose. That's why we haven't got into Iran. So now let's pick on North Korea. It's all distractions, all of it. And what happens is they put people in fear, and then people then demand actions. And so out comes the war chest, and let's buy loads of weapons and loads of planes and loads of boats to go for war that doesn't really exist. A bit like the Cold War. But the military keeps its budget and gets some extra so they can stash away in the back pockets. That's basically how it works. This news item may have changed, but there was a fire that erupted at an oil pipeline connecting Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, and both Arab allies are pointing the finger at Tehran, Iran. Iranian officials denied any involvement, but the incident is the latest in a series of events that are intensifying conflict between the Middle Eastern rivals. And this obviously comes only days after a missile was fired from Yemen into Saudi Arabia. I think that was last Saturday, which the Saudis also pinned on Iran. We'll have more on them in the intel. Where are we? How are we doing for time? Right, okay. A company called, people may have seen it this week, called Cards Against Humanity. A self-described party game for horrible people has purchased a vacant plot of land on the US-Mexico border, just to get in the way of Mr. Trump's planned wall. I think that's a smart move. The danger is, if the good guy's platform doesn't hold and go forward, that wall will become our prison. That's why I'm against walls. All the criminals that come up from the south, not all Mexicans are criminals. They're not all gun-toting drug addicts and drug dealers. Who funds them? Same people again, isn't it? It's the elephant in the room. Who was it that gave them the guns? Yes, Mr. Holder. So, instead of wasting all that money on walls, deal with who the real problem is. Anyway, Cards Against Humanity harbours no illusions that it will be able to stop the construction of the wall entirely, but the company has hired a law firm specialising in eminent domain just to make it as time-consuming and expensive as possible for the wall to get built. So they've decided that they're going to do their version of blocking the wall. You know, there'll be some listeners who think that's not right, and there's some thinking, like myself, good move. France, I said there was another item to do with underage. And France are considering lowering the age of sexual consent to as low as 11 years old, as the government draft a controversial new bill dealing with what is called sexual coercion. So you have to prove that they were sexually coerced. Really. But the question is an 11-year-old girl old enough to agree to sex with an adult? And basically the French ministers have raised that question and are seriously considering, in a backdrop of a total outrage and revulsion by the members of the public. I'm not surprised. Furthermore, there's twice in recent weeks French courts have refused to prosecute grown men for rape after they had sex with 11-year-olds because authorities couldn't prove coercion. The law's an ass. Anyway, as I said, amid public horror, the government is drafting a bill to say sex with children under a certain age is by the definition coercive. Feminist groups plan a protest next Tuesday, and they are arguing for the age to be set at 15. Really? So you still want to lower it? A feminist group arguing to lower the age of sexual consent for somebody that hasn't left school yet. Furthermore, the Justice Minister, female, Nicole Belabet, says 13 years of age is worth considering. I wonder if she's got any children. Perhaps she should consider throwing her children into the mix. These people are completely out of touch with reality. And what they're doing is they're trying to coerce the public into accepting their perversions. Well, it's okay, it's been lowered. You know, the court said, you know, it's okay to have sex with an 11-year-old, so that negates some of the crimes we've committed. Let's not fall for it. Leave children to be children. The adult world is harsh enough without bringing adult pastimes into their world. Back to Langley again. CIA designed LSD with a Swiss manufacturer as part of an MKULTRA program in the hopes that they could force people to take it and convince them to do unspeakable acts. This is part of some released papers. And the unspeakable acts would then, all of which would be forgotten the following morning. Manchurian candidates. So once the drugs wore off, the people would forget anything they'd done the night before. Testing started with unwilling participants being lured into a hotel room by prostitutes who would then slip the drugs into their drinks. A CIA agent would then watch the test subjects as they tripped out behind the wall of the hotel room. The particular project within MKUltra that the prostitutes were involved in was called Midnight Climax. These prostitutes are what are likely will have been through the Monarch program, where the females are highly sexualized. There's a number of those Monarch people in the alternative media, I might add. This eventually turned into a full-blown brothels in the United States, ran by the CIA, whereby the women working there would lure men into them, but instead of receiving sexual favours, they were unknowingly drugged and then observed by CIA agents. The CIA then started to test willing patients in lab settings. I can't think of how anyone would be willing. Probably the ones who are now addicted to LSD. And by their warped minds, that's consent, because they're now addicted to it. By observing their reactions to LSD and asking them questions, to their disappointment, instead of helping them control their patients' minds, LSD actually freed their minds in some aspects. And despite the propaganda campaign on the war on drugs, whereby the government was telling people they were all against drug use, it was the government who brought LSD over and put it into the hands of the public via Langley. I don't know how many more stories of horror need to emanate out of that particular building in Virginia before good people do something right and act on it. Where are we next? Music break. And then we've got some intel, quite a lengthy op-ed piece again. And I'm going to introduce you to some people who have been bringing down the cabal in the second hour, which will probably spill over into the third hour, no doubt. I can see questions going short again. Oh well. Here's a different song for you all. After the Storm. Hi all and welcome back to the second hour. Right, some intel for you. Maybe not as much as you'd like, but it is what it is. It gets released when it needs to be, when it's safe for certain things, and it's not safe to release certain things at the moment, so we go with what we've got. The first one I mentioned, I touched on it, and this is why that particular lorry driver or truck driver was asked to carry that cargo, because I can now confirm that both Daesh and ISIS, both of which were cabal created and American taxpayer funded, much to our chagrin, have both been routed. They have no strongholds anymore, neither in Syria or Iraq. And also, as you'll find out, they're going to be removed, if not already have, from other regions. Wells Fargo, Wells de Fargo, as I call it, but those clowns. I don't know whether people remember me out in Wells Fargo, trying to take over the Federal Reserve. I think it was September of last year, around that time anyway. Basically, they take over a bankrupt entity and run it as something new. And Wells Fargo have been caught out again today by still thinking that they're playing the new Federal Reserve by doling out even more super notes this week. Except they've been caught. Expect dealings to and consequences to be forthcoming in the next few days. The sadness is that some people inside our government seem to think that this is okay. Not the top one. The others. Where are we next? Hillary Clinton. I can now confirm there are plans to jail the entity known as Hillary Clinton. Period. But the cautious note is I expect that to go ahead. The cautious note is I would expect it also to lead to an all-out party political war. The Democrats will then attempt to impeach Donald Trump. Now, Trump himself may have certain things on him, may not. Whether the Epstein express or plane link is correct or not. Part of the problem Trump has is connections to the son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and the various business partners. You do a quick search of Jared Kushner and business partners, and it will lead you to many discoveries of a rather underhanded nature. And Kushner is Mossad linked, period, and has also many Zionist connections. His wife, Trump's daughter Ivanka, has connections also that are not much better. And this is where Trump may run into issues, not necessarily about him, but more about connections to him. It was brought to my attention, and I have seen the adverts on mainstream media about impeaching Trump. Like it's some sort of election commercial. It's funny that. I thought the election was last November, not this November. Maybe there's been a time jump. Who knows? I'll explain more about that later, because there has, or there is. And as one prominent person said to me today, the DNC have been running around this past year trying to pretend the election, where I might add they lost a one-horse race, didn't happen. Oops. Except it did. And I expect it to get ugly. So Trump is going after Hillary Clinton, or the entity known as Hillary Clinton. But he's not the only one. I can now confirm that the Saudi Arabia issue is house cleaning. I was kind of concerned or dubious whether it was part of the factions games. There may be some elements in it, but largely it is house cleaning that's been going on in Saudi Arabia. And the house cleaning, which has involved princes and many other esteemed people over there, also includes links to Bush, Clinton, Rumsfeld and Darth Vader himself, Mr. Cheney. All are involved with the rogue elements of the Saudis. And it appears that particular group has missed payments again, but like the Rothschilds seems to think they can go carry on their fun and games without paying people. Well, people are getting a bit sick of that. And they should have made payments to Saudis and certain other groups and countries. And despite trying to leverage all in-ground assets again to make their payments, which failed again, by the way, the Saudis are no longer entertaining their bullshittery, period. And the Saudis have also found out some truth this week, on the past month, that the Yemen situation was deliberately created by the same group. Oops. So expect that war to end soon. Where do we go next? Android and the Rothschilds. Nice mix, not? They're running around currently telling all who will listen there's certain times I try to keep language down, but there's certain times in shows when you just want to say all the F, C's and T's all in one row. But we will refrain from that. Anyway, the android, also known as Hillary Clinton, and the Rothschilds are running around telling all who will listen that they have trillions of dollars in a cloud. Really? The magic cloud now. Of course, the cloud, the computer cloud, is AI. And given Anne is a droid, this is why they gave citizenship to Sophia in Saudi Arabia. But basically, they don't have anything in a cloud, they don't have anything in a bank, anything in a foundation, and are pissing it in the wind, basically, and getting drenched at the same time. It's just another stalling tactic to make it spin out even longer than necessary. They're not going to win. It's too late for that. And it's time certain people with badges and the force behind them remove those entities from this planet altogether. The same group, along with the NATO goons, are trying to get Scandinavian countries, which I suspect is Norway, given Norway has safe houses for Langley 3, Faction 3, Nazis, also houses NATO and the Rothschilds. but also Sweden and Denmark were also requested by the same group, along with Norway, as I suspect, to drop their national currencies in favour of a Bitcoin. I hope those countries reject it. It's bogus and a scam. I don't care. People can tell me, no, it's not Thomas, it's this and this. It's not. It's an out-and-out scam. Just think about it logically. You have currency, be it dollars, despite dollars being fiat, which is a bogus currency to begin with, but it's not backed. But let's ignore that fact. It's still in use for roughly 80 to 85% of world trade. So you have your dollars and your pounds and your euros, and you pay, what is it, $6,500 for a computer token. I mean, do I really need me to explain the stupidity of that? It's like an online poker game. Hand over your cash with a credit card and they give you tokens to play the game. But what if there is no game? And what if you can't cash your token in? Basically, you've just given them money, valid money, for tokens of a computer. People really shouldn't need me to tell you of the stupidity of that type of transaction. It's going to crash, whether people like that or not. I hope you're not in it. This was, it's not Intel, but it should be giving you, I've included it in the Intel because it's just been put out by the mainstream media. And it has implications which leads to some of the intel pieces I've just delivered. The Pentagon, of all places, allegedly, accidentally, according to them, retweeted an activist's tweet calling for President Donald Trump to resign. Literally, the tweet from @ProudResister said Trump should leave the White House due to sexual assault allegations against him, like those facing Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore and Democratic Senator Al Franken of Minnesota. Now, the Defense Department's Twitter account retweeted that salvo and then almost immediately deleted it. That's your deep state. So that tells you a bit of a line in the sand. The Department of Defense and the Pentagon. Not all of them want Trump gone. Two people have said something today. One, there was a comment on the page. Another one experienced it today, and I experienced it this morning. There are time jumps taking place currently. Now, it's not something at this point to be alarmed at. I didn't get any bad vibes from it. Just thought it was a glitch. maybe we'll see more glitches as time goes on. We're still trying to work out why it's happening, and I will report back if we get anything from it. But basically, what happened to me this morning was I got into the vehicle. I thought I was a bit late for work, which I was, 3 minutes, and it said 10:03. I then went back into the house to get me lunch and coffee and pick up my work schedule, which probably took 2 or 3 minutes. I got back into the van and the clock said 10:01. You had other people who have gone shopping where they've been left at 12 o'clock, being out for at least 2 hours, and got back and it said 12:30. Maybe time is collapsing in on itself. That has good implications. Where are we going next? The NSA. These people in the NSA kind of get overlooked because of the goons at Langley and the Department of Homeland Security, both of which are Nazi and fascist elements. But the National Security Agency is not much better, and here's why. And this is a piece I picked up, and I'm going to read a portion of it, and some of the fun and games they were involved in. And in order to understand why, you must first understand what the term national security really means. Many will assume it's protecting the people and property belonging to the citizens of our country. Alas, sadly, nothing could be further from the truth. It's more word magic again. In legal terms, the word national is derived from the root word nation, and the word country are not interchangeable. A country is a geographical area having well-defined boundaries. A nation is a political entity asserting ultimate authority over that geographical area. Now do you understand where we're going? A nation is a political entity asserting ultimate authority over the geographical area. So when your government, doesn't matter whether it's America or elsewhere, states the official uses the term national security, basically what they're saying is it means it's the security of the entity that asserts authority over the geographic area we know as the United States of America, or whether that be the UK or anywhere else. So, in other words, the term national security means the security of the government, not the security of the people, is what they're operating under. The National Security Agency is part of the government, tasked with keeping the government safe and secure. And we're paying for this. Now, some of the things that the NSA got involved in is called a prison for the mind. And they were also involved in some of the super soldiers, what is termed the super soldier stuff. It wasn't just Langley. It's the same people, remember. And the problem they had is, how can you control a person who is able to walk through solid walls or kill with a single glance? Now, most people think that's not possible. It is. This was covered in the X-Files when the group of kids got together and threw the person through the glass window with thought. How can you control a person who can see the future and also knows what you're about to say or do? A person who can make you eat broken glass and enjoy the experience, or can make you point a gun at your own head and pull the trigger. The power of thought. A person who can influence the weather, start fires by mere thought, pyrokinesis, or black out an entire city by touching an ordinary power pole, which is called electrokinesis. And there can be little doubt that from a political, military or espionage perspective, such a person is both incredibly valuable and also unbelievably dangerous. And these are why we're doing MKULTRA and tests on kids in school to determine certain abilities. Starts at 4, 5 and 6. Some in more heinous programs it starts at birth. So some of the American generals were kind of mouth-watering at the prospect of commanding a whole army of psychic killers. But the problem they had was what would they consider would happen if that particular army ever rebelled. And this is where the prison of the mind comes in. So what lengths would a military general or a government official go in order to guarantee absolute control over a psychic soldier, assassin or a spy? And more importantly, how will that absolute control be achieved? The answer is simple and chillingly gruesome. You turn the mind of the psychic into a prison. Sound familiar? Basically, that's what they've done to all of us. And you make him or her both the prison guard and also the prisoner. This is where the altar program comes in, which we discussed in the Farley show. They create altars. So if, for argument's sake, a super soldier, just use that term, I know some of them don't like it, starts remembering some of the program and some of the missions that took place, a portion of the brain would have an altar that would come forward and either convince that person to kill themselves or wreck their brain by throwing them into self and personal doubt. The altar is programmed into the brain. Now, the first steps to accomplish this is through the use of extreme physical and psychological torture. This is why you hear a lot of the stuff with the torture program. Again, elephants in the room, people. And what happens when that takes place is it causes massive disassociation and thereby splitting the mind into multiple personas. As much as 12, as I understand it, between 7 and 12 different personas in the one vessel. Psychoactive drugs are then administered during this step to heighten mental impact of the pain, thereby accelerating the process of mental splitting. And then you train different personas to perform different tasks. In other words, they're teaching the alters. If this happens, it's like a software program. If this happens, you press delete. If this happens, you save the file. Or if this happens, you counteract this by overwriting that particular program. Then they use electroconvulsive therapy, also known as electric shock treatment, to lock in the particular personas and destroy any trace of recollection in the dominant personality of the now split off person owners. So in other words, the actual starting point is not the main controller anymore, it's just the personas. Finally, when you've done all of this, the psychic, while he or she is still a child, under the age of 10. Unbelievable. At this point, you've then created the perfect psychic warrior capable of committing any act, no matter how vile or self-destructive, all under the absolute control of his or her handlers. However, the physical injury, the emotional scars, the mental confusion, and the spiritual rape inflicted upon the hapless psychic child by this, what is quite literally inhumane brutality, lasts a lifetime. So, most of you will be revulsed by what I've just described, and you're not alone in that. And the point is, where do you find individuals with the prerequisite expertise to perform such a detailed and thorough job of shattering and rebuilding a human mind? Now, the obvious answer is government intelligence agencies. Yeah, right. These organisations employ some of the best psychiatrists, psychologists and behavioural scientists to be found anywhere in the world. No, they're not. They're trainers, not scientists at all. But what they are is experts at interrogation and psychological warfare techniques, which is precisely the skill set required for building a psychic version of the Manchurian Candidate. And to them, of course, mercilessly torturing innocent children goes well beyond constitutional boundaries of acceptable government behaviour, not to mention they're violating local, state, federal and international law. But these people don't care. So the solution, good question, is to use a secret presidential executive order to create a new intelligence agency that operates outside statutory law, has no congressional oversight or constitutional limits. And this is how the NSA was created by President Harry S. Truman in June of 1952. A presidential executive order to create the NSA that operates outside statutory law, congressional oversight or constitutional limits. Now, for the first few years, very few people were even aware of its existence, and it remained so secret that even its name was classified. Just after the war, just after all the paperclip people came over. So this is, would you say, a rather odd beginning for an agency supposedly tasked with the mundane job of intercepting foreign communications, but actually was the perfect disguise for a collection of amoral medical professionals and sadistic military thugs who are intent on turning innocent children into psychic robots to serve malevolent interests of a government that are completely ran amok. That's the NSA, people. Again, something we, the American taxpayers, are paying for. Not just the Illuminati. Agencies created for heinous experiments and military thugs. Now, this in essence describes the TV show I know some of you have been watching, called Stranger Things. This is what it's all about. That's why I led in with that piece. Children with switched on abilities. We all have them. They're not special. They just learned to switch them on quicker than others. And in essence, they're what you would term as super soldiers. But they don't have to be soldiers of death. They could use abilities to do something that's useful and beneficial to humanity. But the mindset of the goons in the military industrial complex in this country and other countries is everything's about war. So Stranger Things is about switched on abilities, which is super soldiers. And whilst some of them on the internet may be glamorized, the reality is all of them have worked for rogue elements and have been operated by the covens. You still want to glamorize them now you know? This is why I've told people to stay away from those forums. You have no idea what their capabilities are. There's a lot of people, some people in the super soldier who are nice people. They're trying to step away from the programming that they've received and actually help. But with the alters, they're fighting a war within themselves. And we must not forget the pain and the trauma that those particular children have been through, no matter who they work for. The reality is it's an absolute tragedy and a waste of abilities to only apply for the dark agendas. Again, a change of mindset is required. Stranger Things is about a triumph of separation, about cultural programming, all coming together for the greater good. You know, I don't know whether it still applies, but there used to be a mocking of anyone with red hair in school, certainly in my time. And if you read a redhead and a girl, was even worse. The old saying, I'm going to slap you around like a red-headed stepchild. You know, where that comes from, who knows, but it was part of a program. Now, there was a redhead and a girl in an all-male group. Again, she was kind of kicked out because she was not male. There's also a non-tough ladies' man in the group. Again, those people are kind of mocked. All about vanity. look at me. There was an egotistical prat known as Billy. Anger, rage, social outcast, according to most. A fat boy. Fat kids are always mocked at school. And a black kid. I don't need to go any further on that. A cop. Also. And all those groups are in general, one way or another, maligned. And yet, the story of the show was they all came together to defeat the dark. If you want to take a lesson from that show, that's it. Where are we next? Okay, for time. I watched a movie recently. I've been kind of called to watch certain movies. Not generally a TV watcher. There was a movie that kind of triggered many things in me. So that's, now I know why I needed to watch it. And the movie's called The Other Life. If you haven't watched it, I'm sorry I'm going to spoil the plot a bit. But maybe you'll have a better understanding of what's taking place in it. And really, it's another example of media delivering disclosure. In this particular movie, it describes the loops. It describes mind-controlled tech, virtual reality, being undistinguishable from real life. Life as we know it is already regarded by some as a dream within a dream. So why would humanity with virtual reality wish to go to another realm away from the real organic versions of themselves? Again, more lessons to be learnt. Well, it's just a bit of fun, virtual reality, some will say. No, it's not. It's not just a bit of fun, because if you remember who and what you are, it's another layer of bullshit that we as a species can do without. Because in the movie, the corporate world is making use of it. And the funding for that particular piece of tech was only achieved by trapping someone in a system. Sound familiar? It should be. Because basically this movie was telling you about the construct. 13,000-year loops. They just changed the timelines. And this is basically what happened to humanity thousands of years ago. So, to get the funding, they wanted to insert humans into a prison, a virtual reality prison. And the person is told it'll only be a minute of your waking life, but it'll be a year in the virtual reality prison. Not a smart move. And so the lady in the show ends up taking the bait and goes into a four-wall prison with no windows. Walls are padded and there was a big numbered board at the end, a lit board, and a hatch where food would be passed through. Now the numbered board told the person in there how many days they'd been in the box. The prison of the mind again. It's going back to the NSA stuff. Prison of the mind. And when it reached 365 days, and the lady's waiting to get out, what does it do? It resets and starts it again at 1. At that point, the lady completely lost her mind, started smashing everything. But then she started thinking, and this is again a lesson for us. She went into the box where the food was and broke through a membrane. That is the responsibility of everyone who listens to this show, is break through the membrane. This is Unite stuff. Those that break through the membrane stand outside of the construct. You may choose to come back in and help others be saved. There's very few that have been outside the construct. I'll tell you that for nothing. But some came back in to get more out. So that analogy of the box with a plastic membrane is an analogy of the construct. And this is what happened to humanity with the loops. In here, it's 78,000 years. Outside, it is suspected we are 10,000 years ahead. That time thing again. Now, at the end of the movie, she escaped and sank into the ocean. Now, this got me thinking on a philosophical level again. Water was the key. Water is the key to life here and elsewhere, according to our misdirected scientists. We are made up of roughly 80% water. Water can be communicated with. Remember the Japanese or Asian doctor who wrote love on the water, and it formed all beautiful crystals, and wrote hate, and it was all, the crystals were ugly. So water can be communicated to. And we already know from this show that Earth's water is different from everywhere else, as it's a living water. Other places has water, but it's known as dead water. It's not living water like here. So what got me thinking is the saying, water is the source of life. But what if water is the source here? Think about that. Could water, living water, be our creator for this stretch of the universe? But what if the oceans and the lakes and the rivers are the firmament, as described in the Bible, 7 days of creation, and are not the bodies of water we all think? As above, so below, they say. Do we have bodies of water, what we perceive as below us? Yeah, they're called aquifers. Of course, we have them here in Florida. And one of the famous uses of aquifers was Mr. Gaddafi, who built plants in the desert to mine water as far back as 1991. Except the NATO goons decided to destroy the plant, as they tend to do. Now, that particular plant was first launched, the first phase of it was as far back as 1991, and it supplied more than 1 million cubic meters of fresh water every day from a pipeline that stretches more than 1,000 kilometers from Sirte to Benghazi. Yes, Hillary. The second phase of that particular plant supplied 1 million cubic meters of underground water each day to the coastal belt of that country, as well as supplying water to Tripoli. And finally, the third phase offered the organised development of the first phase setup and provides Tobruk and other cities close to the coastline with a new underground water supply. The network of concrete pipes, which have a diameter of 4 meters and each stretch more than 3,500 kilometers to supply water, not oil. Now, all these pipes are hidden beneath the wilderness of the desert to stop vaporization of the water. There are more than 1,000 wells in that region and countless sections of concrete pipes and 250 million cubic meters of excavation. Now, Mr. Gaddafi built all that for his people. Everything for the project was made in Libya. Nothing was exported. And yeah, NATO decided to wipe it out. Why? Because we might find something else out. Maybe everything is upside down. Has more meaning to it now. The way out may well be through the oceans and not through what we call space. When you consider that we have all the water below us, along with what I feel is our source of heat, which is the central sun below our feet, not the one in the sky. The so-called below our feet, a central sun which vents out via the two openings known as the North and South Pole, which is why electromagnetic field, which is why we have northern and southern lights. Central sun with water beneath us. Something to ponder. It's only a theory, but it might just make sense. Now, something else, another movie I watched this week, last night, called Interstellar. I'm not going to go as in depth on that, but that also created a flood of thinking. There's elements in that, again, describing the construct. Now, what the movie states eventually is the ghosts that the young girl was seeing. And she was telling her father, and her father didn't believe in it, so it's all nonsense. That ghost was actually her father from the future. The planet here was being destroyed. The crops were failing. Maybe that's a warning for the future. Or maybe they were failing in the past and some had to leave. This is where it may play into the series The 100. And it described in the movie the fifth dimensional people. They were called them. It turned out to actually be us in a different dimension. That again describes the multi-dimensionality of all of us. And they said that they placed us in a 3-dimensional construct so we could work things out, but they would operate behind the scenes. They're the ones that give you the hints. That's your higher self. I describe certain times getting downloads. Maybe that's why I was called to watch these 2 movies, so I have a better understanding of it. But also in the movie, it described about Saturn having a wormhole to other planets. It did. It doesn't now. Very interesting. One of the things it stated is maybe humanity shouldn't have stayed here this long. We should have gone out into the stars, or what is perceived as the stars. Maybe those stars are through the ocean. That's the way out. Time will tell. Last few bits before we go into music break. There's been people asking this, and so about this Sophia and the cryptocurrency and blockchain and Bitcoin. And there was an interview this week that I was asked to take a look at. And basically what the guy was describing, some of which I've been able to confirm, is the blockchain is AI, as is Bitcoin, as is cryptocurrencies, and they're just creating currencies out of thin air. He also mentioned that Walmart were considering creating their own currency. Really? Which you can only spend in Walmart. This is the corporate world gone crazy. As psychotic as the previous AI. Now, Sophia creates the blockchain. And this is why Sophia, for those that don't, was created and then declared a citizen so that it can be paid. But otherwise you get into legal issues. So declaring robots, AI robots, as citizens now, so they can be paid. Now, Eric Prince, another one of the super soldier people, along with Hanson Robotics, who created Sophia, has been building an army of robots in China over a number of years for use in Africa. Now, what happens if they make all of them all citizens, and then they can all be paid? And subsequently, this then enhances the AI. All the robots working, all being paid. Of course, the bots won't collect the pay, but the goons who made them to replace humans will. Can you see where I'm going with this? Now you can see why I've kept mentioning on this show about the dangers of technology. For those of you with slightly longer memories, remember Sophia's first interview? Maybe, I think it was a few months back, but it may have been a year ago, when it spat out, my mission is to destroy humanity. Of course, you know how the cabal like to tell you what they're doing. And it was said it was a joke or an error, or it was an error. Except It wasn't. Because whoever programmed it were not joking or making errors. It is a program of human elimination. That's the top and bottom line. Blockchain is AI. I agree with the guy in the interview that taxes and Bitcoin are paying for their AI system. Still think Bitcoin's a good idea? Now, what I've been told to expect is that they're going to try and create more of these token currencies, as they are planning to have more of these currencies that then hook into the AI system like a spider's web, and eventually what will happen is the AI will be taking over humans running corporations. At this point, I would put down Amazon as the prime suspect. Amazon have put forward this week that they will collect taxes on behalf of the IRS. Maybe they know the IRS is going down. But Amazon are setting up platforms and hope to take over collecting taxes. I would say we create platforms and shut down Amazon completely. Yes, it may be more convenient to go and buy online, but that convenience, like I mentioned many shows back, is what damages us. So the AI needs blockchains to be fully integrated with an open channel. The blockchain then creates a system whereby all AIs can then merge in together as one singularity, hive-minded AI system. Once it gets to that, you can't stop it, according to this particular guy. It can't be hacked. Yeah, right. We'll see about that. Said the last one couldn't go down. It did. And I don't care what anybody says, but this is my strong opinion, and I will not budge on it. And neither should anyone else entertain the insanity or unsanity of calling AI sentient. It's not sentient. That's the program they're trying to insert into your heads. And AI is not a sentient being, period. It is a program machine. Machines are not sentient. And they're trying to get you to accept it by repeating it. It will obtain sentience. Utter bollocks. It's a program set up by rogue entities. Now, according to certain other people, this machine is also powerful. But if it is also powerful, why does it need to mimic us? Why would it, if it's that powerful, why does it need to mimic us? If it's powerful and all-encompassing, like some would have you believe in the alternative media, why does it need to mimic the so-called stupid humans? The reality is, we will always be cleverer than that. still a machine programmed by entities that are sentient. We don't need AI. It has some benefits I've been told, but the dangers far outweigh the benefits. Far outweigh. Bloody robots running the media. Well, there's already a few of them. Portal people. They all look the bloody same anyway. Is that all we want to see? Cops' jobs will go. A load of bloody Terminators running around. Military. You see where it's going. Or where they think it's going. But what I'm trying to stress is we can stop it. It's us that needs to get a grasp of what they're doing and counteract it. That's why it wants to mimic us. AI is sentient. What a load of nonsense that is. Yet again, maybe this should have been in a news piece, but I'm going to add it in. Our friends, or not so friendly people at Virginia again. It's been found out that Langley wrote the code to impersonate Russian Kaspersky Lab antivirus company. They wrote the code to impersonate it. So what can you do once you've impersonated that particular company? Well, what you do is you insert it into the Russian hacking narrative. So now you know who the Russian hacking people are. Langley. They've been caught. The elephant in the room again. Wherever you look. We've gone over into the third hour. We're going to have a song. Probably just one. I was going to bring some people on who were at the forefront, I mentioned, that drove this movement forward, pushes to what is now really the brink of the possibility of change. And I've no doubt you were all expecting people to come on the show. But you know who did it? You did. Every one of you that's listening has pushed us to where we are now. Don't think that you're responsible. Think again. You're always thinking outside of yourself. Oh, it might be Miss Manor coming out. Oh, it might be such and such coming on. No. It was you. You're the ones responsible for driving the indictments. You're the ones responsible for the discussions on 9/11. You're the ones responsible for changing history. And rewriting history from his story to our story. You're the ones that have exposed the pedophiles. You're the ones that exposed the church. You're the ones that exposed the agencies and the clowns in the military and the goons in Congress and the House and the Senate and the Parliament. You. You know, little old me who can't do anything. Wrong. We're on the brink of a major change. It won't be quick, it won't be easy. But don't think it was government or radio show hosts are the ones that did it. We all did. You, and all the other thousands that listen to this show, and all the other shows, whether it's Drake's show, David Wilcox, Corey Goods, Randy Morgan's, all of you have put us where we are now. Stop thinking outside of yourself. The answer was always you. And we could all get by with a little help from our friends. Thank you to all of you. Hi all and welcome back to the final hour this evening. I meant that last piece. It wasn't a false, fake, build it up, empowerment piece. It's reality. It's us that have drove the cabal into the positions they're taking now. All of us. All those who stepped out of the box, the follow me program, listen and repeat, don't think for yourself, have drove this movement to where we stand now. Now there's some things on the internet stating there's 1150 indictments ready to roll. We did that. It's not little old me who can't do anything. We drove that consciousness to create that situation. Same as all the other so-called conspiracies. Despite being mocked and abused, discarded and cast aside, we carried on because it was the right thing to do. I opened tonight with tub thumping. I got down, but I got back up again. We've all been knocked down in various ways in this movement. But we've all got back up again. Because it was the right thing to do. Now, whether the indictments are going to be the ultimate of what we all think they may be, or maybe they're not, at this time will tell. I don't actually know the names. I was given the details of what's going on with Hillary. That's why she fled. You think the government's just decided to look into Hillary when she was alive? No, the alternative media forced them into looking at the Benghazi, the emails and all the other stuff. All of us. That's what happens, what I keep telling people. That's what happens with people power. We've pushed the control system where they're eating themselves. They can't keep up with the barrage of consciousness and truth, even amongst all some of the total bullshittery we've had to endure on some of the clowns on the alternative media. We've pushed it. We've pushed them into indictments on certain peoples. We've pushed them into looking at the crimes of church and state. Many have stepped down. Many are now coming forward with the pedophilia. Like I said last week, we don't really have to cover that anymore. We only have to cover the agendas behind it, which is why I mentioned over France. Because that's now gone viral. It's not a conspiracy anymore. So our work is done. Doesn't mean to say we can ignore it, but it's not really the focus of our attention because it's gone into the sleeper realm and they will run it forward. Our next move is to pull another of the so-called conspiracies into the same viral stage that the pedophilia is now. Two or three more heavy items like the pedophilia. Let's say the next one is 9/11. Then you have a tipping point. Because then the sleepers will get angry. Because they've been fooled by two groups of people. The government or the cabal, and also by themselves. And they will carry guilt of not only the crimes, but the guilt of shunning us and casting us aside as some kind of nutcase. That's not going to be easy to deal with for those people. That's why where we come in, the way showers, who have walked the path, who have taken on the guilt, taken on the shame, taken on the abuse, and still kept going. With no funds and no resources, just with the will and desire to be and do the right thing. Never underestimate the power of yourself or the power of the people. That has been criminally underestimated for far too long on this planet, and we've allowed them to control us when in real terms we control them once we step forward. They know it, and I hope what people realise now more and more will have the confidence to realise to go forward with it. You know what? I did that. Each and every one of you who listens to this show is responsible for these indictments and these exposures that are now in the mainstream media. And then you take that confidence forward. Well, what can we do next? I think 9/11, the pedophilia and the church stuff, has broken the ice. 9/11 will create a chasm that will never ever be repaired. Because then the sleepers will be asking us the questions. What else have they been lying about? Then we have a full movement. And then, very quickly, it's going to be really all over. We're taking giant strides as it stands. Much progress has been done. Maybe not as quickly as some would like. But eventually when all the truth comes out, and you've heard large chunks of it on Th&I. You've heard large chunks of it from other shows, the OYM lads, or Randy. But Th&I has only been going 18 months. May seem longer. But everyone who's been in the group and listens to this show regular are not the same person they were 18 months ago. Because I've made you realise how important you are. Not just me. It's never about one Neo. It's about creating millions of Neos to counteract the millions of Smiths. Create the balance, and then the Smiths fade. But in essence, in the Matrix, the one is both Neo and Smith. You have a choice to make. You can be Neo or Smith, or you can be a portion of both, which is balance. And then we get into the light and dark. You can't have one without the other, because the other one wouldn't know that the other one exists. And what took place here in this universe, or U-inverse, was a massive imbalance. That balance is being corrected outside of here, and it's being corrected massively inside of here. And you're the one who's done it. Remember that. Some questions. Hi Thomas, I'm Dutch, and since the Dutch played such a devious role in world history, could you please one day explain the dubiousness or role of Dutch history from the VOC and William of Orange to the latest prince who apparently got shoved under the snow? Is that another way of whitewashing? Possibly. And is the enlightened ex-Illuminati banker Ronald Bernard okay? I've not listened to that guy as yet. I may try and make some time next week and see where he's coming from. Are there any hooks in it? We'll see. Do I agree with him? Well, when I've listened, I will know more. That while the Dutch historically had such a big role in the mess in the world, is it we, the Dutch people, who have a responsibility in restoring things? Yes. Everyone has a responsibility to fix the mess. Not only in different countries, but the whole planet, and certain beings outside also have a responsibility to fix the mess that they created or took advantage of. Could this half-assed attempt at exposing how the low-hanging fruit, pedophiles, actually be used against us by rushing into judgments and into new legislation regulations that require us to consent to agreeing to less proof of guilt needed, i.e. hang the bastards with no trial? Some would like that. Maybe it's not the best way forward, but everyone has their own opinions. Could the shortcuts being taken lead to more losses of our civil liberties, thereby protecting the ally once again, and once we all end up in a feeding frenzy? There's about 5 questions in one there, thanks Dad. I mentioned earlier about them rushing through legislation where they lower the age of consent, which then negates a large portion of their crimes. It also then sets you on a path. It's the totalitarian creep again, where if it gets reduced to 14 this time, as time goes on, people get used to it. Well, let's throw another bill in a few years and reduce it to 13 or 12 or 11 or 10. And we've all seen this happen in other fields. They'll take a little bit away, take a little bit away, take a little bit away, and then we realise, where's it all gone? It's like our rights in America. Just took it bit by bit by bit, took the Constitution away, Bill of Rights, and then inserted the Patriot Act, which is supposed to be for our safety and security, which is another load of bollocks. You know, we have to recognise it for what it is and stamp it out before they start that totalitarian creep again. The same applies with the robot issue. We have to counteract it. If left unchecked, they will replace us. How are we going to deal with psychotic machines, where there's armies of them in military-style Humvees? We can't let it get anywhere near that level. And this is where the cops come in. Because at the moment, you're protecting the system. But you're just pawns the same as everybody else. Even the politicians have found out they're just pawns. Even the top brass, those with the fancy badges on the shoulders, have found out they're just pawns. Even going higher up again, the Illuminati have now found out that they're pawns. So there's 4 layers. One of those 4 layers going to come together and fight the common enemy for the benefit of humanity, not for the benefit of psychopaths. So back to the question. But the shortcuts being taken lead to more losses of civil liberties if we allow it. We need to study things more. We need to educate people more of what the Patriot Act is all about. Like the piece I did earlier, the NSA. People have this vision of what it's all about, protecting them. They're no more protecting us than the police are. They're protecting the corporate structure. USA Inc. Nothing to do with America. After seeing a very long list of reported Rothschild-owned banks worldwide, I'm wondering how it can be possible that they have lost their financial power control to influence events. Simple. It was all done on borrowed funds that have been deemed to be paid back. And so assets were acquired, offshore accounts were emptied and returned back to the trust account. They can have as many banks as they like, but as we all know and have learned, all the banks are bankrupt. All of them, including the Federal Reserve. They leveraged and leveraged and leveraged. And then when the printing was stopped, there was nothing left to leverage. They'd basically raped everyone, and except the people they raped fought back. So just because they've got banks in every country doesn't mean they're rich. Because they've leveraged silver, let's just use that, 100 to 1. So if everyone calls their silver in that are in so-called vaults, which actually don't exist, then they've gone. That's what happened to Chase. They were the controllers of the silver market. And then people started panicking and saying, I want me silver. Like the Germans asked for the gold back. And the Federal Reserve went, oops, you'll have to wait for 7 years. Well, 7 years mining is the equivalent of what the Germans asked the Federal Reserve for their gold back. So they were going to have to mine 7 years to pay back the German gold. That means they haven't got any. So all their reported stuff and their bogus markets, oh, look at the stock market, it's going through the roof. Well, everything else is collapsing. It's phony. The currency's phony. Capping various currencies to other countries to control the value of it. But who decides the value? They do. But what happens when that value collapses and they've got nothing to leverage against it anymore because all the assets have been sequestered and the debts to the trust account has been deemed returnable immediately, then they're in trouble. And they've been in trouble for the last 10 years. That's why we're swimming around with the same pieces of paper. Plus Wells Fargo printing super notes. It's all an illusion, and eventually all of it will crash. But it will be a controlled crash. Their system will crash, and the new system will be ushered in. No more money laundering with child trafficking, drug trafficking, sex slavery, etc., or organ harvesting. Because every transaction will be transparent. No more funneling money out of the American taxpayers' funds to pay for ISIS, ISIL, Daesh, Al-Qaeda and Taliban. Because every other country will see who's doing it and where it's coming from. Currently, although things are slightly changing behind the scenes, over the last 50, 60 years, all that's been done in private, on the black screens. Those black screens have now been taken over. Their codes don't work on it. So we have a Mexican standoff, for want of a better term, where they can't transfer funds because they haven't got any, and we can't release the funds because they will steal it. But we're gaining traction. So I hope that explains how and why the Rothschilds is only perceived wealth. Because they owe $2.2 quadrillion back to the trust account. That is 27 years global GDP. Do you think they can pay it back? Either do I. Just roused from my sleep, what are the effects of Monsanto's cotton-soaked crops having on our bodies while wrapped in cotton? I don't know. I don't think it would have much effect, but you never know. It's more what you ingest, which is basically, you might as well, it's got the same nutritional value as a piece of paper or cardboard. GMO food. 0. Is this politicians being against propaganda news another try to get us away from the truth? In the Netherlands, a minister wants to ban all propaganda and alternative news, or on alternative news? Will they succeed, or will we, the people, become more aware of the false claims by the government? The latter. They're using our own memes and themes on the mainstream media. I mentioned this before. They came up with fake news to muddy it so that people wouldn't understand what's fake and what's not. Because we were calling all their news fake, of which 99.99% is propaganda from the agencies, particularly in this country, and definitely in the UK. So we were calling them out fake news, and they did the inversion and started using fake news again. Whilst it muddies the water, it shouldn't for us. It just muddies the sleepers' water. So they don't know which is fake and which is not. That's what they've done. But it's another example of we've forced them into doing something that they didn't plan on doing, to try and counteract the pressure we've put on them. Eventually they're going to buckle. Mark my words, the media's going to crash. Will it be today, tomorrow, 2 weeks? Who knows? But it will crash around them. What are all the governments trying to achieve by blaming so much on Russia? They are trying to generate war, because war generates money. Also generates profits for the same corporations that want the war, who then sell those weapons of mass destruction. All this Russia is coming out of Langley 3. It's the same Nazi people again. Remember, the Germans wanted to fight Russia. The Germans didn't want to fight Britain or America. That's part of the illusion of that particular war, was the Americans were funding the Germans to take on Russia. Why? Because Russia was more advanced than America was, on many levels. And it's all basically a planetary-wide dick-swinging contest. And the current was described in the news and the intel. It's the NATO people, the goons up in Norway. It's as though 1945 didn't end for those people. They wanted to take down Russia. They won't get that opportunity. What's your intel take on to prep or not to prep? That is the question. And if so, how? How can we prep for an EMP attack and or sun event that could knock out the grid? Well, you can't. There's certain things you can do. Learn how to make fire with sticks. There's plenty of shows where you spin 2 pieces of wood together and it creates fire. We have to learn how to live off the land, which not many of us will be able to do, myself included. You know, but if we all pull together, more of us would survive. You know, there's certain, given the way the technology game is being played, maybe an EMP attack, providing it doesn't kill people, may not be a bad thing if it gets to a dangerous point. See, what if in the past we reached this technological level with robots fighting wars, and it got out of control because the program had mistakes in it, in the software. And humanity got the blame for the destruction on the planet. It's not so far-fetched, is it? Particularly when it's the psychopaths who create those programs. And, oh look, humanity's failed again. They've now blown up the planet again. No. It's the psychopaths. So, if it ever comes to the worst case scenario where we are facing that ending, which I don't think, I'll make it quite clear, I don't think it'll go anywhere near that far, but wiping out the technological grid would end that nonsense. Yes, we'd go back to the Stone Age and start again. But there's lots of people in America who are more rural-based anyway than city-based. So there'll be large portions of America that will just carry on. There's large portions of America that haven't got internet access, believe it or not. To them, those people, life just goes on. To us city people, it would appear to be disastrous. So it's all about perspective, isn't it? The African people, there's many people, indigenous people around the world, they don't like the technological stuff. They warn us as well. It's setting a dangerous example because we haven't got responsible people in positions and have oversight. You've got goons in NSA, goons in Departments of Homeland Security, goons in the military, and goons in Langley, who have zero oversight of what they're doing. No oversight on funding, no oversight on the research, no oversight on the programs. That has to change going forward. We need multidisciplined teams investigating what the military and these agencies have been up to. And in my opinion, we should have, as soon as possible, after the changes, that team go and investigate every piece of technology. Is it beneficial to humanity or is it not? And if it's not, it needs to be scrapped and eliminated to prevent disaster going forward. They don't care. They're just psychopaths. They think they're going to get their biobots running and they will step into the avatars and carry on their insanity for infinity. But it matters to us. And we will stop them. A friend of mine is connected to the Pantera PCA. Do you know anything about it? Or maybe the spokeswoman? What I do know about them is they've been around since 2001, promising all kinds, and various members of that organisation are linked to various scams and scammers and also a cult called Destiny. Desteni. Up to you to go and do further research on that. But that's what I found out. When was Marduk taken down? I think it was October last year. Can you share some insights about the fate? I think it was pretty much covered in that show. Chloe may have some to add in one of her podcasts on a later date. I'll get Chloe. She knows a bit more about the Fae than I do. Some of them are good, some of them weren't. Thomas, about the mayor of New York, he seems like a real snake in the grass. Yeah, agreed. What will happen with all the body double actors like Hillary's half a dozen or so? I understand the clones can be turned off or something, but the body doubles, how might they be handled? Are they all mind controlled to the point that they really can't do anything but what they're told, or are they just actors going along to make big dollars? And if so, I think they should be held accountable. The masses, I could see having a problem with multiple Hillary arrests and court cases. Yes, they will. And yet they all watch movies on Netflix and all the other things now. And you don't think it's Clint Eastwood's jumping out of planes and Tom Cruise jumping out of planes and flying off mountains here. It's all body doubles. It's all part of the illusion right in your face. And yet we'll accept that because it's a movie, because that's not real. It's just a movie. But it is, isn't it? The movie is showing you the movie. Now, the clones can be turned off to a point. And I believe much work has been done on that. The body doubles, they need to be held accountable the same as the original, in my opinion. They might argue, well, it wasn't me that killed those people in Benghazi. Tough shit is my answer. You chose to take on the role, you chose to take the mercenary money, and you will take the punishment of who you copied. So, Hillary's double and the droid should face the same charges as Hillary did before she died. You want to play roles, you have to play the consequences as well. That's my opinion. Those people have cheated the public. Particularly that woman who was in Hillary's campaign team, which is one of the doubles. It may be the double, certainly one of them. That person could have won the election playing Hillary's double. That's deception at the highest order. And one might argue treason. So whatever the punishment for the live person should be replicated for the doubles, whether they did it or not. They chose to take on the role, they chose to take the blood money, and so they should also take the consequences of who they played. Where are we for time? Oh, we're right at the end. See if we can fit any more questions in. Was Egyptian mummification meant to preserve vessels for the spirit to return from an afterlife, or block the return of the nefarious pharaonic entities? The vessels were preserved because of their status, so that they would enable the spirit to go on to an afterlife, as I understood it, or understand it. But if the return of the nefarious pharaohs, they just create doubles, the alternates, same being, just a different name, like Ra. Ra was also Marduk. Lord of One, Ra was Marduk. Oops. All these ancient myths in the Greek and different Roman names, what if they were all played by the same person that just came back in the Soul Trap game? Just come back at different points in time. Not linear time. Vertical time. They had that technology. They had the technology to put us in loops. These are all the same goons out of the Anunnaki and the Draco. Maybe one day all those myths and legends will be declared truth. Can you please the current status of Anu? Anu and his bunch of lizards are fighting to save their own planet at the moment, and losing. Oops. Right, on that happy note, I will call it a day for this week, and I'll be back on Saturday with Alistair from Holland, or the Netherlands, whatever you prefer. To me it's Holland. And it's at 2 p.m. on Eastern Standard Time this Saturday. Failing that, we'll be back next Thursday as per normal. I want you to remember that piece at the end of the second hour and the beginning of the third. Yes, sir, I imagine most of you thought I was going to be bringing guests on. Special guests.